A little bit about me first. I've been working in product in New York City for various media and news organizations. I started my career at the Wall Street Journal, where I focused mainly on our mobile applications, so you could read the latest stories, look at today's news, look up stock quotes, things like that. And I'm most recently at A+E Networks, which, if you're familiar with television, it's the parent company of brands such as History, Lifetime, and A&E. And I'm working on the streaming video apps for those products. So tonight, when we finish, I want you guys to get a good understanding of these 3 points. So number one, why retention is important, just like the course name. How to measure retention for the products that you guys work on. And 3, what you can do to improve retention of the products that you guys work on. Cool. So I'm going to start with a couple definitions, and then I'll get into some sort of case studies and some stories that I can tell you about work I've done and other things that I've read about. So just for a pure definition, retention, it's basically a calculation you can do to calculate that is the number of active users that are continuing to perform X, whatever activity it is, divided by the number of people at the start of the period who were doing that. And that gives you a rate, basically. Churn, you'll often heard this term about, my product, we have this churn rate. So that's how many people are leaving your product. Calculation for that is just 1 minus your retention rate. So if your retention rate is 80%, your churn would be 20. And then another concept is customer lifetime. So this is really a shorthand of how you can gauge how long somebody is staying with your product. So for example, if we had a 10% churn, you do 1 divided by 10%, and that's 10. And you want to look at it, if 10% monthly churn, that means your average customer will stay with you for about 10 months. So I'm going to tell you a story about a product I worked on. It's called Lifetime Movie Club. So Lifetime Movie Club was a subscription product that we started at A&E a few years back. And it was really catering to people that love Lifetime movies. There's sort of like a niche audience that's very passionate about that. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but we have movie titles such as Killer Single Dad and The Psycho She Met Online is some of the offering. Very campy, but we have a very fervent audience around that. Available on iOS, Android, wherever you want to get that. So when we were launching this product, we knew we had a lot of people who would be interested in it. But we wanted to sort of model out, like, okay, how many people can we actually get to use this product? How well does it have to do to sustain itself? So put together a quick model. I'll show you not that model, but just a something that you guys can kind of take when you see this presentation, plug in your own numbers. All the numbers I've made up, but it's just kind of to give you an illustration of how important retention can be for products. So I'm going to click that right here. All right. So here we have, apologize if it's a little small, I can make it bigger. But basically this shows us month by month how many people we think we can get to our product. We have conversions, like if we have 10,000 downloads, we think we can convert 15% of people to use the product. We're estimating, let's say, an average retention rate of 85%. And at the bottom, you'll see, based on the people starting and based on the people that are kind of churning out, our active subscriber number. So if you go with these inputs, you're seeing we're growing the active user base. Pretty cool, looks good. But when we're playing with this a little more, so you can, I'll put in a number. All right, let's say if the retention drops to 78%, I'm going to make this 12 actually. So you'll kind of see that these numbers are now decreasing. So within a year, we're starting to lose people, and that's kind of scary. So I was like, wow, we have to be like a pretty good product to even just maintain the number of people that we currently have. Even if you say we increased our conversion rate from 12 to 15%, let's do that. You're actually still losing people because that's just the power of churn. So you're just continuing to lose people. So that was like an important lesson I learned and a little sobering. So that's one example I wanted to show you guys. This is in the presentation, so you guys can go play around with it when you guys get home. Another example, sort of from my industry, so streaming wars, I'm calling this slide. So this article was in theinformation.com. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that site. It's a really good tech publication. There's a paywall. The link is here. I think if you give an email, you can read the full article. But basically, there's this basically rush of subscription products in the market now. Your Sling TVs, Disney Plus is going to launch, and there's so many ways to watch video online right now that are subscription-based. And they basically ran an article that was pretty cool. It was just showing like, hey, that's cool, you can get a lot of subscribers, but some of these services have a lot of people churning out. So they're like these people, they might get a big audience when they start, but they have to make sure that they can keep them. They kind of divided it. So they divided it by category. So if you look at all on-demand streaming video, some services have churn as high as 25%. If we kind of look at the model we saw earlier, like we'd probably lose users really fast. So it's just something to be very mindful of. The more niche you get, news media, lower churn rate. For example, when I was at the Journal, I don't remember what it was, but it's pretty low. But if you think about it, it's a very it's a big business brand, but it's pretty niche. A lot of people are probably paying for it from a corporate subscription, so they're going to keep it. And it's really valuable information for people looking to do M&A or buy stocks or something like that. So kind of the more niche something is, the better chance it probably is. And the final example I'll show you is, consumer apps. So this chart is from a service called Quetra. And I came across this by this guy, Andrew Chen. He is a VC at Andreessen Horowitz right now. I think he was the former head of growth at Uber. And he writes a lot about retention. His stuff is really good. So in the end, I have some recommended reading for you guys, and you can check out his stuff. So he basically did this analysis with this firm for apps on the Google Play Store. So day zero is basically when you first install the app, and then down here on the x-axis is days since app install. And this basically just measures how many people came back to use the app. And if you look, day 30, you're like 90% of people have left. And it's just kind of to illustrate like, hey, things are really competitive out there. So, these three slides kind of encapsulate why retention is so important. So one thing also that we'll talk about, so we talked about sort of like subscription retention and product usage retention. Today we'll focus more on the product usage retention. With subscription, you're sort of waiting maybe till the month or the week is over to find out if the user renewed, but you want to know sooner as a product manager, like, are people actually using my app or my product? So there's something called like leading indicators that we'll talk a little bit about as opposed to a lagging indicator. And actually, I'll get into that right now. So, capping up what we had before, it was, like I said, your product needs to be really good just to survive. It's tough to grow new users. You might have to pay for them. Not every product is Facebook that has sort of like a huge addressable market. Things are more niche than that. So if you keep users, that's a way that you can actually really grow your product. Okay, so now that probably depressed you guys, it made you think that product is really, really hard. We'll move on a little bit on how you can improve some of the retention metrics. Okay, so this is the leading and lagging indicator slide that I mentioned. So the way you can think about a leading action is things that people do in your product. So we'll get to some examples of that. So it's really actions that people are performing every day that tell you, yeah, people are using my product. And that will give you a lot of confidence that, hey, when it comes time for them to renew their subscription, or even if it's not a subscription product, that I can count on having this person for the long haul. It's upstream, basically, and it's performed by customers, whereas a lagging indicator is revenue and profit, and you don't know really revenue and profit real time. Those are things you'll find out at the end of the month or end of the quarter whenever your finance team tells you that. So if you're waiting for that, you might not be able to see that, oh wait, nobody used, somebody might pay for 2 months, but they might not be using it. And that's probably a pretty good indication that in months 3 and 4 that they're not going to use it. And you might be like, wow, nobody renewed this month, why? So we'll be focusing on the right side of the slide. All right. So your product's retention. So I'm going to teach you guys how you can measure retention of your own product. In every product, it's a little different. So you want to be very specific with how you're measuring your product. So the first component of that is something called a critical event. You might have also have heard it called as the aha moment. So this is an action that user takes that kind of provides value. Like, what are they coming to your product to do? And oftentimes this can also provide you with value. So If they're watching a video and they have to watch an ad, your company, my company, for example, that's what we do. We gave a benefit to the user, but they're watching an ad, so we're making money off of that too. So generally, those are the characteristics you want to look for. So I have a couple of products listed that you guys have probably heard of, and I'm going to ask for some participation. Just ask you guys what you think the critical event is. There could be more than one. I just picked one, what the main one is. But let's start with Lyft, which is the ride-hailing service.
Book a ride.
Book a ride? All right. Anyone else? All right. We got book a ride. Airbnb.
Book a room.
We got book a place. Gotcha. The History Channel app. You can watch videos there. What do you guys think? Watch a video. Love it. Spotify. Play a song. Gotcha. And then the Wall Street Journal. Sweet. One thing to notice, there can be more. So Lyft and Airbnb are, I guess, like two-sided marketplaces. So for Lyft, there are drivers, and for Airbnb, there are people that put their home out. So, I'm sure these teams there's probably separate teams dedicated to the Lyft product for the driver. So they probably want to see how often, their drivers maybe accept a ride. That might be a critical event for that team. And for Airbnb is, how many times does a host actually list their property? So that could be something that they do. Any questions? Is good? Cool. So the second part of this is something called a usage interval. So this is going to tell you how often people use your product. And this is something that, you as a product team and the people you work with, you probably have a pretty good idea of, how your product works. You probably speak to your users. I hope you should. I hope you do. So you'll probably have a good sense of how often you expect. But even like industry-wide, you can kind of guess on what that interval is. There's a link at the bottom that I have to Amplitude. We'll get into that a little later. But they're a company we use for product analytics. I use them in my current job. And in this article, they sort of have a more scientific, mathematical way to identify that. But we're just going to do it by kind of feel, I guess, and like the experience that you have. So going back to Lyft, as a, let's say, rider, what do we think a typical usage interval is here? Daily? Sure. Anyone else? Monthly? Let's see what I put weekly, but this one's a little harder to gauge. I don't work at Lyft, so maybe they have some super users who are using it every day. They probably have some distribution of people who use it weekly. Airbnb? Quarterly, yeah. I was thinking quarterly, perhaps. It depends how much vacation time you guys have and how nice of places you like to go to. History Channel app? Weekly? Yeah, we do see weekly. I can verify that. Spotify? Daily, yeah. I think theirs is daily. And then the Wall Street Journal? Daily? Yep. For news, it's daily. So this point is critical because, for example, we'll talk about news. So if you are a news site and you have reporters writing articles daily for you guys, but you notice maybe your users are coming monthly, that's probably not a good thing. So you're spending a lot of money to create this content, and let's say you're paying through it for advertising, but users are coming to your site monthly. So that's not good. So you definitely want to readjust. Maybe you readjust your strategy on, do we publish fewer articles, or can we get the users to come to the site more, basically. So once you take these two concepts, you get something called a retention curve. So basically, this is a demo app that is accessible from this link from this company called Amplitude. You can go, I think you just have to give an email and you can play around with their tool for free and you can manipulate some of this stuff. So I think that's a really good way for you guys to learn more about it. So what I did, this demo app is called Amplitudes. It's like a music streaming app, basically. So what I plugged in here was, the first event was you're a new user, and then playing a song was the other event. So we looked at it daily because we thought music streaming is probably a daily event that people come to do. And so this basically tells us day 0, the percentage of our users who downloaded that day, how many of them are doing that play event, and then every single day after, basically it says, of all the people that started in 0, let's say on day 13, There's what, 10 to 12% of people that are still doing that event. So what's interesting about this chart, you'll notice the shape. So it flattens out. So that means that people are coming back consistently to use that product. So as a product manager, this is really good. You'll be very happy that you have a shape like this. If we saw something that started at that 75% level and kind of was a diagonal straight down, crashing to zero, that tells you nobody's really coming back. So that's when you want to reassess the product. But given this, you have something to work with. It doesn't mean you'll have the best product ever. You can improve this by wouldn't it be great if this line leveled off at 25%, right? That means we have more people coming back to the app, more people playing songs, probably more people resubscribing or hearing ads. So that's something that we'll talk about how you can improve. So along with this chart, basically, so this chart is essentially made up of the retention table. So all these numbers basically make up this chart. So the way to read this is there's two segments. One is all users, which is basically a weighted average of all the days in this range. So these are all the people. This 370,000 number is pretty much everyone who had a fresh install. And then day 0 through day 5, this is the percentage of those people that came back exactly on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And then we can also look at it in a daily view. So of the people on April 26th, this has been their behavior accordingly. And this chart is taking that weighted average at the top there. So some interesting things here that we can kind of note. I think these, so you'll see, these numbers like in the 6, 7 range in this like lighter shade of blue. I think those are actually weekends. So one thing you can kind of glean is, okay, maybe people are streaming less music on the weekend because they're outside doing something, and maybe they stream on their commute and they have no commute, they're enjoying their weekend. So it's kind of one insight that you can get from that. So that is your curve. So now you want to, like I said, you want to try to do things to improve this, right? Or you want to find out, maybe, one thing that's interesting here is from that day 0 to day 3 period, a lot of people did leave your product. So you might ask yourself why. So one way we can analyze that is through something called cohort analysis. And a cohort is basically a group of people who share a characteristic. There's 2 types of cohorts. One we can call an acquisition cohort, and that is time-based. So you can group users by the first time that they use your product. As we saw in the earlier chart, we grouped everyone by that day 0. So that's how we're looking at them. But then you also have something called a behavioral cohort. So this is grouping users by specific actions that they've taken. And you can look at them and kind of analyze actions that they take in your product or even their retention and maybe compare them to each other. So I'll give you a couple examples of cohorts. So acquisition cohorts. So people who downloaded the Lyft app in May 2019. That is an acquisition cohort because they're grouped by that specific time that they got your app. People, product school graduation class. So if you're in the May 2019 cohort, congrats, and you're part of that cohort. Behavioral cohorts are, like we said, people who did a specific action in a given time period. So Hulu subscribers that watch The Handmaid's Tale, that is a cohort of users. And people that create a playlist in Spotify, that is also a cohort of users. So you can use these things, acquisition cohorts and behavioral cohorts will tell you different things. Acquisition cohorts are really great to show you when users leave. So as we kind of saw, when I look at this chart, the things that stands out, your longer term retention is looking pretty good. You should be pretty happy about that. But if you're looking for room for improvement, you might look in those first few days and try to analyze, why did people leave? So one of the classic sort of tactics in this kind of chart is evaluating your onboarding of your app. So, are there things you can do to take a step out for the Amplitudes app, which is music streaming? Like, how quickly can you get a user to stream a song are some things you want to try. But another thing to also be mindful of is, is your product in the hands of the right people? Maybe your product is in the hands of people who won't appreciate it, and no matter how good it is, they might not want to use it. There's an article I linked to at the end. I don't know if you guys have heard of this email client. It's called Superhuman. Basically, this guy sort of built this new email client. He basically said it's like how Gmail would work if they had no external pressures and wasn't run by Google. I don't use it, but I hear really good things. It's a startup, has pretty good traction so far, but their founder wrote this really great article on how he pretty much spoke to users and found out those who would appreciate it the most, and that's how they launched their product. So that's something else. It's a little, maybe a little more marketing focused, but if you're in a bigger company, your marketing arm might handle that kind of stuff. But if you're a small company, startup, you probably have some control over that too. So just, the classic answer to this is, improve the onboarding, but it just might be that your product isn't necessarily going to the right person. So you do want to be mindful of the channels that you're launching on. So acquisition cohorts are really good for showing you when users leave, but they don't necessarily show you why they leave. You're just basically understanding the time period in which they left, which is valuable. Let's say the answer was onboarding and we made that better. We ran a couple tests. Maybe we wouldn't have as much drop off in the beginning there, and that might lead to a higher retention curve. So behavioral cohorts. So now these can show you why users might stay and why they might leave, as opposed to when. So when you're looking at this, you can take, you should brainstorm kind of all the things in your product. There's probably multiple things that somebody can do, and you can try to hypothesize, like, hey, is action, if user does X, Y, or Z, are they more likely to retain in your product if they don't do those things? And this is kind of fun because it's not necessarily, it is a bit of a data-driven approach, but if you're talking to users and you're understanding pain points and you can kind of tell what features they get excited about, you can sort of triangulate around some of those behaviors and try to see if users that do that have better retention. So yeah, you're using your contextual knowledge here. If you work with a team of researchers or designers, I think they'll probably get a lot of good feedback that can help you with this type of exercise. So for the same app that we have in Amplitudes, Amplitudes it's called. I was playing around with it, and you guys can do the same from the link. I created some cohorts. So the number 3, all users, that is it's probably the same retention curve that we saw in the beginning. So if you just aggregate all users, that's their retention. It's pretty good. We were happy with it, but we actually found some users that have better retention than those guys. So the blue color is people that have followed one or more playlists, and the green color is people that have favorited one or more song or video. So now this kind of tells us, oh, that's interesting. So people that are doing these actions, they're more likely to use our product. It sounds pretty intuitive. If we look at the numbers behind it, the segment of those users is just probably a smaller number. So we can do things like, okay, how can we get more users to maybe follow playlists? How can we get more users to favorite song or video? Maybe those are some features that we want to highlight a little bit more. So those are things we can test. One important thing is to not confuse correlation with causation. You can also look at people that maybe who have not followed a playlist and compare them to follow the people who have followed the playlist. And then if you still see the delta there, you're probably onto something. And it probably gives you something that you want to test out. An important thing to note though, so the data is great here. There are some sort of perverse incentives that you want to be careful of not kind of over-relying on. And this is kind of where I think product is a bit of art plus science. So you have these numbers, and there's something you want to go to. But we could blindly just every time a user launches the app, we could ask them to follow playlists. But I think people have low attention spans. They don't like to read things. They don't want to be bothered. So that could actually cause us to potentially lose users. So you definitely want to be mindful of that. Definitely things you want to test out in your product. you might be seeing that you actually made retention a little bit worse. So you want to be mindful of that kind of thing. One example I can give from the product I work on, so I don't know, I can't show you the chart for it, but we looked at users who are viewing, so we have a bunch of TV shows in our app. So we looked at users that watch just one show, users that watch 2 shows or 3 or more, and we definitely saw better retention for people who are using the app more and watching more video. It seems like pretty obvious, but engagement does generally lead to better retention. So that was great data for us to go and test out, hey, can we get more users to go into this group? Some of the tests we ran, they didn't prove as successful as we wanted. We might go back and retest some of that stuff, but one of the things to talk to users, like we never necessarily heard that finding something to watch was a problem. So you just want to make sure that you want to talk to the users to understand that like there is a problem to solve, and you don't want to just kind of nudge them to do something that just because the numbers tell you you should do it. So it's a very delicate balance, a lot of trial and error, a lot of testing. And maybe there's a higher order thing in the funnel. Maybe they're just having trouble. So in our app, you need to authenticate and sign in to watch. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe your onboarding wasn't that great, but once you're past the onboarding stage, a user just doesn't have the time to watch as much. So there's a lot of stuff you want to test. So that kind of goes to my point about you often hear, being data-driven. I think data-driven can lead to some results that you don't want, but data-informed, I didn't come up with that, but I really like that saying. But being data-informed is just kind of letting the data guide you, along with other things like talking to your users. And then, you can use experiments and data to prove that you reached your goal. So if you ran the test and you were able to show that, hey, we actually improved retention of the all users category because now more of them are following playlists or favorite song, that's like an opportune time to use data to show that you've improved that. So I think we're nearing the end, but I do want to share some reading that has definitely helped me a lot, kind of influenced the way I look at product management. So Andrew Chen, like I mentioned, we showed his chart on the Android app usage. Reforge is a blog. It's run by a couple of guys. I think they used to work for, they did roles like growth at Pinterest and things like that, but they have a really good series on retention. Amplitude is the product analytics software we use to calculate retention in our app. Big fan of theirs. They do a lot of good writing as well, and you can use their demo app. Sequoia Capital, it's another VC firm. They have a whole series on building products using data. They talk about retention a lot there and other things like engagement and growth. And then this article on Superhuman, which was the email client I mentioned to you. The article is basically called, how they built an engine to find product market fit, and that was really by, finding users that they know would really appreciate their app. So you can read about that too.